Okay, so I have had a few internet issues today, so hopefully this will go smoothly. We'll see. If it cuts in and out, well, that's how it goes. So this is a follow-up to the last one, the last exploration video. We're talking about Portugal and Spain. And so now I'm going to focus a little bit, hopefully this will be relatively short, on what was going on in really the Americas. So as we know, Columbus leads the way. He discovers the Americas accidentally, right? He stumbles into the Americas, we should say. And pretty quickly, Columbus he's got to sell this to the King and Queen of Spain because they finance his voyage, and so on them just lots and lots of people coming over to explore what initially they thought was India, but after a while you figure out that it's not. So a couple things I want to emphasize: Spain, when they came in, they were not large settler colonies. They were these young seekers of adventure, the conquistadors, looking to get rich, and many of them were looking to get rich and go home. Some of them did want to stay, but the numbers were relatively small. So early on, what they were doing, we know we had people going looking for gold, and et cetera, et cetera. But quickly they wound up, when they did find places where there was silver, et cetera, like Potosi and they exploit that. So the main thing was they were looking to exploit the mineral wealth of the Americas, send back gold, but especially silver because there was more of it, back to Spain. And so the other things were kind of an offshoot, like the hacienda system, the comuna system that gets set up. Those were less about developing some new kind of economy or situation, and more about allowing them to exploit to the maximum this mineral wealth, that's being shipped back to Spain. So the encomienda system, obviously, these are these grants of labors of indigenous people as essentially slave labor under the proviso that we're supposed to convert them to Christianity and bring them civilization, et cetera. That's kind of just a facade to make, but many of them will be used to try and mine for silver and gold. So another issue with that is that they were really the haciendas they developed, like these big ranches, things, were to keep the mine supplied with the necessary food, etc. At any rate, that brings the big two ideas, and these will review, and that's fine. One is, of course, the Columbian Exchange, and I want to make sure this is where people always kind of tend to mingle these things. Columbian Exchange is not about trade. That's not what we're talking about. It's about biological movement. So, in other words, what are these new plant and animals and bacteria, viruses, et cetera, that move back and forth between the new nations, between these newly discovered continents that had not known about each other before. So the pluses to the Columbian Exchange, are that all kinds of new crops are introduced on both sides of the Atlantic that particularly in the old world, in Europe, Africa, and Asia, will drive population growth. So we have all these things like potatoes and corn or maize, right? Tomatoes. Well, tomatoes were not huge for population growth, but potatoes and maize certainly were. Some forms of squash, etc. Those were tremendously useful to the people of the old world. Plus some of those luxury things like cattle, goats, chickens, obviously, but also sort of work, right? So horses and things like that can pull pack animals, mules, etc. And the other thing, the downside, or the other side of the coin, is that they bring over a lot of this bacteria, viruses, and things. So in the same way that it is thought that what we're going through right now, the coronavirus, novel coronavirus, COVID-19, may have jumped from bat to humans. It is by most scientists and historians, et cetera, for example, that some diseases jumped inadvertently from swine to humans, Americas. So, but they also, some of them were brought in smallpox, et cetera. So that brings to the really major, dramatic effect of the Columbian Exchange, the death disease of huge numbers of the Americas. Anywhere, the lowest estimate I've seen is like 50 or 60%, all up to like 95%. Probably, I think, to me, from what I've read, that is closer to the 90% range of people who died from these diseases. So, and that it drove help by the slave trade, because so many of these people were dying, and some of them were able to resist and go taken off into areas that the Spanish had not to get to, but many of them died, and so the Portuguese, who already had some slaves into Europe, now demand more to bring to this, to sell to the Spanish, to their own, bring to their own colony in Brazil. And so other countries in this trade, some Spanish, but English and French, etc. Those are the main ones. English, French, Portuguese are in. Those are the ones who really were large numbers of slaves in the Atlantic slave trade. Most of those slaves, as we know, will wind in either Brazil or the some of them will wind up in the Americas. North America becomes there are some who wind up in Spanish mainland colonies, New Spain and Peru, but those numbers are really quite small everywhere else. What winds up. We also should look at the decline of the Portuguese overseas, with the exception of Brazil, right? They are just a tremendous difficult time maintaining it. It becomes less profitable as they're having to compete with other. It was fine when they were the ones there and they could outrun, say, the airships, etc. But when the English, they are wealthier and have still better ships, and the Portuguese are going to gradually their empire. They can't maintain a fleet. They also have too small a population to really manage this, and so they're going to be displaced. They're going to push them of the islands. It becomes the Dutch East Indies. The Dutch also push out and become the part on a small scale still with Japan. And so English and French will go into India and start developing those. So those are going to gradually, they'll keep their stuff in Africa, right? Angola and Mozambique, and they of course will keep Brazil. Spain, well, we don't need to really look at that. One thing about Spain is they aren't able really to expand too far north into North America. They try a little bit with the mission going up, like the California coast, etc., into southern Arizona with Del Black. But they are unable to. First of all, they don't find the mineral wealth that they expect, so they kind of don't push it as much. And then they had Florida as well, but then the English come in and set up all their colonies. And the English, the big one we want to really emphasize is there's some differences there between the Spanish colonies, the English colonies, and the French colonies. There'll be some Dutch colonies, but they're pushed out of what is right, New Amsterdam. But the big ones you're going to have French take over big parts now, Quebec and East Canada, also along the Mississippi River area. But they're focused not on colonies. They tended to be trappers. They're going after the fur trade. That was extremely valuable. So they were competing. The Russians were trying to get it out in Siberia with trapping animals, beavers, to get fur because it was extremely valuable. Dog seems to be having some kind of a strange dream. The Spanish, we know, they settle in huge numbers, but they did mingle with the indigenous people. Eventually, you will have some more Spanish people coming in there. So they create this new social structure there with them at the top. Remember, the Peninsulares at the very top. Those are the Spanish people born in Spain who come over, get rich, then go back. But then we have now I'm drawing a blank. So the Creoles who are of European descent, born in America, and they're going to be at the top of the heap. So the numbers of truly Spanish or Spanish descent people are relatively small, and those are mainly indigenous populations. And then the English do it differently. They are coming to settle and to stay, and really want to mingle the native people and tend to push them off their land, or in some cases, a lot of them you get wars, etc. Now this will vary in different spots and everything, but the basic thing is that they're coming in and taking over the land, able to defeat the French in the 7 Years' War, and why Spain is not able to hold on to places. More and more years are coming in there, and they're just outnumber the Spanish, and they're coming from a wealthier country. So there we go. That's about all I wanted to tell you about that today. I'm going to kind of wrap it up, and I will speak to you soon. All right. Bye.